Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another Expanse reaction video. Today I'm going to be watching, reviewing, and reacting to Season 4, Episode 4 of The Expanse. Alright, so we were left as per usual with a Expanse typical cliffhanger at the end of the last episode with Murtry deciding to take it amongst himself to basically execute more of the Belters who are colonizing the planet. He does seem to have reasons to have done so, not just because he has good reason to suspect that they were actively involved in, and we now know this to be true, blowing up, hi Nala, blowing up their shuttle during landing. Come on, baby. But on top of this, also, he was actually listening in on their conversations, spying on everyone, and he discovered that they were in the process of planning to kill him and the rest of his men. And, you know, maybe that was a self-defense mechanism on their part, partially also revenge for him killing the other member of their group in cold blood at the previous episode. But suffice it to say, we are going to have more chaos now in the camp than we had even previously. We also are left in a situation where Naomi is not doing well at all. She's not acclimating to the gravity on the planet, and unfortunately she's kept that from Holden. We had another development of one of these structures, just basically, hair in front of me, tunneling itself up out of the ground, and Holden has Alex fire a torpedo into it to stop that from happening. So there's a lot of things that are happening in the moment that are very hectic. So excited to get back into this, see what's going to happen in the aftermath of all this chaos. Alright, so let's not waste any more time. Episode 4, here we go.
Get off him!
Whose side are you on?
That's enough!
Get him up.
So Amos caused the distractions so they could get away. I mean, yeah. But, like, they could have just killed him.
Killing him would be more trouble than it's worth.
Well, good thing he thinks that. I guess,
Search the cap.
Murtry didn't want to risk at this moment in time pissing off Holden
I call it
and
a goddamn miracle. We
people
sure it's
behind
dead?
him.
Captain Holden, this is not a good time.
What the fuck do you think you're doing?
Bringing terrorists to justice. If they murdered yours, you'd be doing the same.
If you hurt Naomi, you are a dead man.
Naomi? She's helping the criminal.
Because you don't get to kill whoever you want. You are not the law here.
Oh, well, you think you are?
Listen to me. We have bigger issues than your shuttle crash.
The structures on this planet are machines, and one of them just turned.
Turned on.
Is that why you launched a torpedo?
Yes.
Did it work?
For the moment, but there could be more.
Well, then we'll deal with them as they come.
I have no quarrel with your girl, and I have no intention of harming her, but she's helping a criminal. Now, if you really care about her, tell us to surrender.
Let's go. Let's go!
Fugitives.
Shaping up to be
Mr.
an
Nome in a
interesting
gutter, they're
clash
heading
of
towards the
wills.
Rocinante. Take a cart, get there first, do not let them in.
Get on it. Move!
Marco Naros. Just the man you want.
Here is your payment.
This is the guy. I didn't think we were
How
gonna
did you
see him
find
that
him?
fast. They didn't even mention it
Him
last
selling in the
episode.
coal in Chicago on black market on Metis.
10%. After all I've done to them. Those Ariagas always were cheap and dumb. Captain Ashford. But nah. Out of respect, I won't waste your time. I'll give you double to let me go.
I'm a friend of Naomi Nagata. There's only one way you're getting out of here.
Woo! Didn't see that coming, did you? Oh my god, I'm so excited this is happening so fast.
The fuck?
Like I was...
You don't seem like a guy who takes a beating well.
Who does?
Yeah, well, next time you pick a fight, they're just gonna shoot you in the head.
You need to take this off right now. I would tear this fucking bed apart.
You want to stay alive? You need to shut the fuck up and hope that Mercury forgets about you.
Fear boy.
Like I said, we're here to help. Mercury is an animal. But he's not wrong. We did this. We did what he said. I did this. I didn't mean for anyone to get hurt. We can sort it all out after we get to the ship.
Okay, so she was involved, but
We've never
she
had to deal with
didn't-
so many veterans returning home at the same time.
Didn't actually
Frankly,
think.
our placement services have been overwhelmed.
Do you have any idea?
Just keep your chin up. Have faith in Mars. Something will turn up.
Consult with your assigned.
Place Ashford. The ghost knife of Callisto, the left hand of Anderson Dawes, and now delivery boy, well, what? Makes me sad.
Ah, shut your mouth, or I will shut it for you. Marco, our ways don't work anymore. The ring has changed everything.
At the risk of getting my mouth shut, you're wrong. There are brothers and sisters alive in the belt today because you took food and medicine and air from the oppressor and you gave it to them. All these colony ships filled to the tits with soil and medicine, shelters, recyclers, all the things that could have made the belt a paradise, still can. Right there for taking. And then, all these new systems, they don't belong to Inya Loda. They belong to who can take them.
Meaning us.
Meaning us.
But Marco, you're dreaming. We don't have the ships, we don't have the weapons.
Don't be so sure about that. The Inner's war didn't just kill their ships. It killed their spirits. Mars is no longer the Mars that we used to fight.
What does Mars have to do with it?
His people, they're the ones buying whatever that guy is selling to the OPA members
It's a long time reporting back to you.
that Bobby helped steal.
Oh, it's an old ship. Now, what did you mean
Whatever
by
that
Mars?
is.
We can continue this conversation later. When I'm back on my ship. Assume you survived the encounter. Who here condemns me? I have a right to know.
Well, I speak for Anderson Dawes and City Station, and I say death.
Life. Black Sky accepts Sonado's forfeit.
Golden Bell also says life. We accept forfeit.
Kubileya say.
I speak for Fred Johnson and Tycho Station. We accept Denaro's offer. He lives. Arrange the forfeit, then call your ship. You are free to go.
What just happened?
And the UN has the personal assurances of Anderson Dawes and Fred Johnson that the problem has been corrected.
What just...
It will not happen again.
I'm confused.
This was a mistake. Marco's words swayed you.
They did not. They swayed the others. Golden Bow and Black Sky already feared their position will decline once the blockade is lifted and Medina becomes fully operational. If we handed out a death sentence against their votes, we would have been asking for a civil war. I did what had to be done.
Yes, but his words will sway more. He has that gift.
He does.
No, he is planning something.
We will keep eyes on him.
Well, he will expect that.
And if he breaks his word, he breaks it to all the factions. He will be signing his own death warrant.
If we catch him, I fear we may not get another chance.
I'm in.
Well, that's big.
I don't know about you.
You just killed 24 innocent people on board my ship.
This ends now. You're not in charge anymore.
Oh. It's not gonna like that. What's that smile, Holden? Don't get too confident, man. Oh, is that, yeah. Okay. Alright. Well, that was the end of episode 4. So as I was watching this, I realized that I didn't do much of a discussion at the beginning of this video like I had originally planned to do, since I had my voice issues last week that kind of prevented me from talking too much at the end of episode 3. So I'm just going to try to incorporate some of those ideas that I was playing around with into my conversation now and into my discussion of what we've just seen. And I think that most of what I was going to talk about with episode 3 was really carried over into this anyway and just developed in more depth, so that'll be good anyway, I think. Alright, so to start out with, Marco is a very interesting character. I was very surprised to suddenly see him and see him playing such a prominent role already in this season. You know, when they brought him up previously and mentioned, you know, who he was and kind of suggested that he was going to be part of Drummer and Ashford's storyline for this season. You know, I mentioned I was interested in that, excited, and curious to see what would happen if he, like, would make an actual appearance and what that would look like. And then they weren't present, Drummer and Ashford, really at all in episode 3. And then this episode is just, he's right there, and then playing a pretty significant part already, just in episode 4. So I'm very, very excited about that, especially because he seems like a very interesting character. You know, Ashford said he'll sway people with his words. He did already this episode, and he's concerned that he'll continue to do that in the future, and he does seem to be a pretty persuasive speech maker. So yeah, I'm very interested in that. And I'm curious, you know, if his presence, his involvement here is going to get back to Naomi, or she's going to find out about this in any way over the next few episodes, or if that's not something that... I guess it all depends on if Naomi and the Rossi crew end up coming back and really interacting with anybody else, or even like communicating with them again before the end of the season, or if they're going to be on that planet going forward. So I guess we'll find out. So I think that, a couple quick things about what's actually going on with the Rossi crew and everybody on that planet, and then I want to talk about some of the larger issues I was trying to get into last video, and then especially how they've been expanded out in this episode. So, on the planet, we continue to have some weird geological, things happening, which we are uncertain of what exactly is going on. So, the ripple effects of Holden just following what Miller told him to do without putting much thought into it, continue to increase. And we didn't see anything like concrete in the way that we did last episode, where the structure tunneled out of the earth and they basically had to torpedo it in order to prevent it from just fully coming up as another one of those structures. But it was kind of underlaying the storyline there, and then we saw the doctor and her colleague back on the ship continuing to talk about it and talking about seeing more incidences over the course of the planet in different locations and seemingly on the move. And Holden also mentioned it to Mercury, kind of trying to say, hey, we shouldn't be worrying about all these, conflicts between individuals and groups because there's something really more serious happening, which he kind of brushed off. It was like, all right, we can worry about that later. But so the idea being, even though they didn't really focus on the kind of alien technology issues this episode in much depth, it was still underlying everything in the background, and we can see that something's going to continue to happen with that in the future. As a consequence of Mercury executing more people, and wanting to also go after Lucia, now we're also in a situation where there's open hostility between Holden and Amos, who apparently is still in their custody, and Mercury's people. And certainly going to be continued hostility between Mercury's people and the Belters, who are there. And meanwhile now, Naomi and Alex, and I guess Lucia is with them, have gone into orbit on the Rossi, so it's just basically up to Holden and Amos now on the surface to sort of keep the peace. And we see Holden at the end there basically saying to Mercury, after somewhat beating him up, you're not in charge anymore. Basically saying, you know what, now I'm in charge after everything you've done. But obviously Mercury isn't someone that's going to just let power go away over to someone else very easily. He doesn't want to cross Holden because, as, Alex mentioned, others mentioned, he is there on behalf of Avasarala, and, Mercury's not going to want to do anything to him because that could have negative consequences for him and his people in the long run. So I think there's going to be kind of some tense back and forth situations happening there, but it's not... It's pretty clear that Mercury's not going to just, fall in line and suddenly just do whatever Holden tells him to do without any sort of pushback or problem, and he's not going to give up on wanting to get Lucia back because he considers her to be a murderer. And this goes back into what I was saying throughout the course of the episode too, and a little bit about him. I was thinking about this last episode. He's not completely in the wrong. They did, even though, Lucia said she didn't mean for anyone to get hurt or killed, they did hurt and kill a lot of people. Whether it was completely intentional or not, they blew something up, and this was the consequence. And so that is a criminal act, and we do know that some of them continued to be a threat. But at the same time, it's not something that you can just go around extrajudiciously executing people because you decide that you are the authority there, and everybody else just has to listen to what you have to say. So, I'd mentioned this previously after he shot the first Belter. If you were to just try to arrest them, bring them up to your main company's ship with the idea of taking them back to some planet for trial, I suppose that would make more sense. But I was also thinking about, it's interesting, who exactly would be putting them on trial, who would be the authority figures in that situation, considering that they are Belters, they're Belter settlers. yeah, I don't know. It would just be, it would get very complicated politically no matter what happened. Yeah, so it's hard to fully judge the situation. You can understand why he would have this hostility, mistrust, and he would want to actually do something about it, feeling that he and the rest of his men and women are not safe there, as long as the people who killed a bunch of them already are just roaming around free or whatever. But at the same time, we know, based on his confrontation with Amos from the last episode, and based on just what we've seen from him so far, that he's not just doing this because he thinks it's the right thing and it needs to be done. He's got a sick kind of desire to harm people, to kill people, to take power, to be in control, to do whatever he wants. Yeah, and so it's you could see some of the reasons for what he's doing, but at the same time, you know that he's a dangerous person, and that some of this may just be excuses that he's found and come up with. So all of that being said, it's obviously not going to be a stable, happy relationship between everyone on the surface going forward. So there's still a lot of conflict to come, I'm sure. And underneath all of that is the tension of we don't know what is happening with this, the planet, the protomolecule tech, and whatever the hell it was that Miller woke up, or why he woke it up, or what's going to be the long-term effects of that. So that's kind of where we are in that situation. And then, for me, kind of the interesting thing about the other storylines that we have on the show taking place in different locales so far this season is it seems to be, with one, Avasarala back on Earth, two, Bobby and her situation and with her family and everything happening on Mars, and then three, with our Belter group, with Drummer and Ashford in particular, and now Marco and everything that's happening there. It seems as though they're using the opportunity to have each of them kind of encapsulate how the existence of the ring, the knowledge of the existence of these new worlds, and the kind of necessary ceasefire, tense peace that was formed between all of these political factions in the aftermath of learning about it, how that is impacting these different groups of people, these political and cultural entities, how it's reshaping their culture, how it's reshaping their goals, how it's reshaping the way that people in those areas look at each other and think of themselves. And it seems to be coming out in very different ways in each of these places. I feel like Earth is the one that we have the least, I guess, sort of information about the impact that it's having on the people overall, because what we seem to be getting, the story so far at least, is really told through Avasarala and then some of the people around her, and now it's going to be a political campaign. So it's not so much like we're seeing people on the ground actually like living through things, but we have seen and heard about colony ships of people from Earth that want to go out and explore, whether to obtain new resources or find somewhere else to live, the hopes of going out and having like a new renewed spirit that maybe Earthers hadn't had for a long time, because of kind of the atmosphere that they lived in for so long. But it seems like the big issue that is being debated there largely revolves around, do we push for colonization now, especially on behalf of Earth, of our own people here, since, there's so many of us, there's very limited space and opportunities here. Do we push for that? Do we go full steam ahead? As Avasarala's opponent coming up in the election was saying, is colonization actually inevitable? Is it the case that some human groups from somewhere is going to do this? And if that is so, then do we want to make sure that we are ahead of that we are in the forefront, that we are pushing for our own people, even if we don't know what the dangers are, even if this means that we could be sending people out to their imminent deaths, even if, as Avasarala is afraid of, this means we could be opening up to the possibility of all of humanity being destroyed in some way because we don't know what's out there or what will be triggering. Is it worth it? And is it worth it to take that risk, especially because we believe if we don't do it, then Martians or Belters are going to do it anyway, so it's not as though we'll be preventing that chaos from happening, or it's not as though we'll be protecting all of the human race by not sending anyone from Earth. We'll basically, because if that's going to happen, if all humanity is going to be destroyed, it's going to happen anyway, so we might as well be on the forefront, and that way, you know, if it doesn't happen, at least our people can get something out of it. So that seems to be the major conflict, whereas Avasarala is really just strongly kind of saying, we don't know what the fuck is happening out there. I was, like, in a position of leadership where I lived through this crisis where humanity almost was destroyed, basically. We almost destroyed each other, and we were almost destroyed by unseen forces we don't understand. And it was only, like, through a great amount of luck and through the smallest like ounce of trust from person to person in these different relationships that had been built from her and Bobby and Holden, you know, that we were able to actually get to a point where that didn't happen. So she is taking a more cautious stance, but is that the right stance? Is it the smart stance to take if her opponent is right? You know, humans are going to go through there and do what they do no matter what Earth does. Then at the same time, it's interesting to think about that's still the position that Avasarala is taking. She's always been very Earth first, but this does also seem more like kind of human first. But it's hard because you see her, even with her talks on Mars, also acting as though, you know, we shouldn't be thinking so much in terms of Earth versus Mars versus Belt anymore, in terms of who's going first and getting what done or whatever. And that is supposedly what everyone's goal is supposed to be, based on this kind of political truce they formed. But as we can see from everything that's happening, both on Earth itself with Avasarala's opponent, on the actual planet where colonization is occurring, and then from the discussions we hear from Martians and Belters, no one else actually is embracing that or fully believing that, so is it even worthwhile to try and fully embrace that idea if no one else is going to be going on board with it? So all that being said, I still feel like the situation on Earth is the one we seem to know the least about out of the three. The Mars situation is pretty clearly encapsulated by everything that's happening with Bobby. And, you know, we see her in conversations with her friend, who maybe is something romantic going on there, I don't know, with her nephew, with her brother, with when she had that conversation with him, with Avasarala, with police officers, with that one corrupt police officer, everybody that she's interacting with her supervisor, who apparently turned her in after she refused to go along with his plan to continue stealing and selling things. What we're getting a sense of is that with the arrival of the ring, the opening of the ring, the truce between Earth and the Belt and Mars, and the prospect of colonization, that everything on Mars is completely changing. That this was a society that was totally driven by the goal of turning Mars into a sustainable environment for future generations, where they could terraform the planet, basically turn it into a paradisical environment where they could live in the future. And even if, you know, for them it didn't happen, maybe their grandchildren would have this better life, and everyone had this working toward this goal. Everyone had jobs, everyone had purpose. It was for Mars, and part of that was to be this very technology centered and militaristic society that was also always on kind of the defensive against Earth, which they saw as holding them back, as being this former colonial force that they'd rebelled against, and also against the Belt, which they saw as being kind of a wild card threatening groups of people. But now they're in a situation where it seems, you know, first, the prospect of colonization, maybe we don't want to stay on Mars. Maybe we want to go out and colonize places where we don't have to terraform. Maybe it can be us in our lifetime instead of our grandchildren's grandchildren. And so, of course, that's going to change the dynamic of people there and what they're willing to work for and what they're willing to do and how loyal they feel towards Mars itself. And then, of course, with the military truce, we see them stripping down their ships and everything, and laying off their soldiers, their navy, and so they're working menial jobs or being unemployed, not knowing what to do with themselves, and that's going to lead to an increase in things like this criminal activity that maybe was something that a lot of Martians in the past could never have even imagined being involved in because they were so kind of, I don't want to say indoctrinated, but really in line with this all of us together as Martians with this one goal sort of mentality that seems to be falling by the wayside, and it's leading to more corruption and chaos, something that Bobby never could have imagined. But by this end of this episode, we even get to the point where she's willing to say, you know what, yeah, I'm gonna go work for people who are stealing things and selling them to members of the OPA and doing whatever they have to do for themselves and their family because, Mars has changed, or Mars has let them down, or Mars as it was doesn't exist anymore. So it's very interesting to see how the ring gates and this truce has really seemingly had a huge, drastic impact on Martian culture. And I'm really curious to see what that's going to turn into going forward, especially now that we know that it seems to be the OPA faction underneath Marco that was buying up whatever it was that was being stolen from their Martian technology or information, and they're clearly using it for some sort of goal that is not very peaceful. And so that brings us to the belt. Drummer, Ashford, Marco, everyone that we're seeing in that situation. And Belters, have been very factionalized, have had different ideas of what the goal of Belter should be. That's something that we've been seeing since the beginning of the show, going all the way back to Miller and his conversations with Anderson Dawes, and then Fred and Naomi. So this is no surprise, and it's continuing this season, but in an interesting way where there's a political movement to try to very much cooperate with the Inders, with Earthers and Martians in the idea of having this peace, and the Belt actually finally for once has some things that allow them to put themselves in a position of partnership, have some sort of leverage. But as we can see, they're very much not trusted by people from Earth and Mars yet. They are not trusting each other. They aren't united on whether this is actually a good idea, whether the best thing to do going forward is to act like the Inners, whether the best thing going forward is to want to push forward with colonizations themselves, whether they want to maintain a peace or whether they believe that the Earthers and Martians are eventually just going to try and screw them over anyway, as they feel they always have done in the past. So yeah, there's a lot of intrigue going on, and I'm very curious to see what the impact of people like Marco is going to be going forward. I at first was really startled this episode because it seemed as though he had maybe kind of convinced Drummer, and Ashford, I had a similar reaction to him, like, why did you spare him? What was that about? It makes sense in context that Drummer, she's saying, if I actually had killed him and these other two very powerful factions in the OPA had voted to spare him, then they would have been possibly against us going forward. We can't have them against us. We need to seem like somewhat united. This way they feel more respected. And this way, if he does turn around and do more shit, it'll be a slap in the face to all of the factions. So we'll all be united in going against him. We'll seem to have more of a fair mandate. And this won't jeopardize the truce. It makes sense, but at the same time, what Ashford was saying made sense too. He, in a short amount of time, with a very short speech while he was in danger of being spaced without much time to think about it, was able to compellingly make his case and convince a couple of the faction leaders, despite the fact that they personally despised him, that he should be allowed to live, and that maybe he was right in what he was saying about the Inners are inevitably going to go back on this truce. They're going to betray us, so we should be prepared, and we should be planning for Belter's future, Belter's prosperity going forward, you know, that this is what we should be thinking of. He clearly was capable of convincing them, and so he's definitely going to be capable of convincing more people while he's off supposedly not doing anything. He's clearly going to be continuing his propaganda campaign at the very least. So certainly there's going to be more with him. I think he's going to cause a lot of trouble going forward. I still want to know what's going on with Naomi's son. Where is he? You know, what's going to happen with this in the long term? Obviously that is going to come into play, or else they wouldn't have brought Marco in at this point at all. At least, excuse me, talking too much. At least that's my interpretation of the situation, but we'll see. And then just one more thing I wanted to comment on quickly before I wrap this up, because I've talked a ton, is now that we've gotten a chance to, like, see Marco, meet him, hear a little bit about him, hear a little of what he has to say, it's interesting for me, and I'm going to want to think about going forward, kind of the similarities and differences between him and Holden, because you can look at the two of them and see two, definite idealists in their perspective, very committed and strongly engaged in what they believe in and willing to do maybe, you know, whatever it takes for the cause they believe in, able to rally people around them, use their presence, their captivating presence and their charm, and their passion to convince other people to come around to their causes and follow them. You can see how Naomi could, like, definitely be drawn to both of them, knowing what she's like. But I think that, you know, as we go forward, we're going to see that beyond the obvious difference of the fact that Marco's kind of idealism is very much formed around a political cause and a certain group of people, where Holden's is much more in line of a idea of the right thing in general and all of humanity, and goodness. That there's also, you know, a difference in maybe the things that they're willing to do, the lengths they're willing to go to, and also in terms of, like, their manipulativeness or honesty or lack thereof. You know, Marco's claiming that what Naomi has told everyone about her son being taken is not accurate. Drummer seems to think he's full of shit, and he probably is based on the things that we're seeing here. So, I mean, there's definitely some major differences there in terms of the manipulative nature of these two individuals, but they're both, I guess you could say they're both kind of powerful, charismatic leaders, is what it seems like I'm picking up so far. And I just think it's interesting to kind of contrast the two of them and compare the two of them, and I'll be continuing to kind of think about that as we go forward. So, all right. A lot of talking at the end of this video, sorry about that, but I did have some catching up to do after episode 3 too, so hopefully you don't mind too much. But alright, I'm gonna wrap this up here. Thank you so much for joining me again today, everybody, and hopefully I will see you next time for episode 5. Bye!